British. February 24, 1944. Hukawng Valley, northern Burma. Lieutenant Hiroshi Matsuda crouched behind a teak tree, his Type 38 rifle steady against the moss-covered bark, watching the impossible unfold before his eyes. For 3 years, the Imperial Japanese Army had owned the jungle. They had driven the British out of Burma, humiliated Allied forces in Malaya, and turned the dense Southeast Asian rainforests into their personal fortress. Japanese soldiers didn't just fight in the jungle, they were born for it, or so Lieutenant Matsuda and his comrades in the 18th Infantry Division had been told during 18 months of specialized training in Hainan Island. What he witnessed now, through the emerald twilight of the Burmese jungle canopy, would shatter every tactical doctrine the Japanese High Command had burned into his consciousness. American soldiers, pale-skinned foreigners who supposedly couldn't navigate 10 meters without getting lost, were moving through the jungle like ghosts. And they weren't just moving, they were hunting. For Lieutenant Matsuda and the 14,328 Japanese soldiers of the 18th Division entrenched throughout the Hukawng and Hukawng Valleys between January and August 1944, the collision between doctrine and reality began the moment an American unit designated 5307th Composite Unit Provisional, codenamed Galahad, but known to history as Merrill's Marauders, entered their operational theater. Among the Marauders were 2,997 men who had volunteered for what their commanders called a dangerous and hazardous mission behind Japanese lines. What made them different wasn't just their tactics, but their complete rejection of everything Japanese military intelligence had assessed about American capabilities in jungle warfare. According to classified operational reports from the Imperial Japanese Army's Burma Area Army Headquarters, now preserved in the National Institute for Defense Studies Library in Tokyo, Japanese commanders had prepared extensive tactical assessments of American forces. The 847-page manual titled American Military Forces, Tactical Capabilities and Psychological Weaknesses dedicated 43 pages to American incompetence in jungle environments, declaring them fundamentally unsuited to close-quarters forest combat due to reliance on mechanical support, poor individual initiative, and inability to endure hardship. What actually happened caught everyone, from frontline soldiers to theater commanders, completely off guard. Major General Shinichi Tanaka, commanding officer of the 18th Division, recorded in his operational diary, now housed at the War History Office in Ichigaya, Tokyo, his initial assessment of American jungle capabilities written on January 28, 1944. Intelligence reports confirm American forces moving into northern sector. Expected tactics, road-bound advance with heavy mechanical support, vulnerable supply lines, predictable movement patterns. Estimated time to tactical collapse under jungle conditions, 14 to 21 days maximum. Our forces maintain absolute superiority in close-quarters forest engagement. Victory is assured. The psychological preparation Japanese soldiers received during their specialized jungle warfare training painted American forces in specific, unambiguous terms. Training documents recovered from the 18th Division headquarters after the war, translated by the Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, and catalogued as document SEAITC 441157, included detailed assessments of American military character. According to these documents, American soldiers were soft men from urban environments, dependent on luxuries, incapable of sustained hardship. Their training emphasized individual comfort over collective sacrifice. They would crumble under jungle conditions where mechanical advantages disappeared and only raw endurance, discipline, and jungle craft determined survival. The manual specifically noted that Americans require hot meals, clean water, regular resupply, and cannot operate effectively when separated from supply infrastructure. Yet here stood Lieutenant Matsuda, age 26, formerly an instructor at the Hainan Jungle Warfare School, where he had spent 8 months teaching new recruits the supposedly unique Japanese methods of forest combat, watching through his field glasses as American soldiers executed a flanking maneuver through terrain his own commanders had deemed impassable for Western forces. The cognitive dissonance wasn't merely tactically concerning. It was existentially destabilizing to everything the Imperial Army had taught him about Japanese superiority in jungle environments. Sergeant Kenji Takahashi, whose unit first encountered Merrill's Marauders during their advance towards Walabum in early March 1944, described the experience in a letter intercepted by Allied intelligence and preserved in the Military History Institute archives at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. We set our positions according to doctrine, strong points along the expected avenue of approach, the road. We waited for the Americans to come down the path where we could destroy them. They never came. Instead, they appeared behind us, through jungle we considered impassable. They had marched through mountains and ravines we thought protected our flanks. When we turned to face them, they had already cut our supply line. This should not be possible for American soldiers. Everything we learned about their capabilities was wrong. The revelation of American jungle capabilities came in waves, each more tactically jarring than the last. According to after-action reports from the 18th Division's Operations Section, compiled in March 1944 and recovered after Japan's surrender, Japanese commanders initially refused to believe their frontline units' assessments.
British Captain Yoshiro Hayashi, an intelligence officer attached to the 18th Division headquarters, maintained detailed tactical notes that were later donated to the U.S. Army Center of Military History. His entry from March 5, 1944, reveals the institutional denial. Field reports describe American units moving 20 to 30 kilometers per day through jungle terrain, maintaining operational cohesion without road access, executing coordinated envelopment maneuvers. These reports are inconsistent with known American tactical doctrine and capabilities, have requested verification. Either our frontline observers are compromised by fear, or our intelligence assessments of American jungle warfare capabilities require complete revision. The second possibility is unacceptable to consider. But the evidence became impossible to deny. The Battle of Walabum, fought between March 3 to 7, 1944, demonstrated the depth of Japanese miscalculation. Merrill's Marauders, operating in 3 battalions, executed a wide envelopment through terrain Japanese forces had left undefended because they believed it impassable. They covered over 100 kilometers through mountainous jungle in 5 days, emerging behind Japanese positions at precisely the moment Chinese forces attacked from the front. Lieutenant Colonel Maruyama Fusajiro, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 55th Infantry Regiment, filed a report on March 8 that was marked Most Urgent and forwarded to Burma Area Army Headquarters. American forces demonstrated complete mastery of jungle infiltration tactics. They moved without mechanized support through terrain we assessed as impassable. Their navigation was flawless. Their supply lines, though extended, remained functional. Most concerning, they showed no signs of the psychological deterioration we expected from Western forces operating in jungle conditions. These are not the soft, dependent soldiers described in our intelligence assessments. These are jungle fighters equal or superior to our own forces. The tactical shock extended beyond mere movement capabilities. According to operational summaries preserved in the Japanese Defense Agency's War History Series, Volume 34, The Burma Campaign, American forces demonstrated unexpected proficiency in specific areas Japanese doctrine had claimed as uniquely Japanese strengths. The Marauders operated in small, independent units that could navigate without constant communication with headquarters, exactly the kind of decentralized operation Japanese training emphasized as impossible for rule-bound American forces. They demonstrated expert fieldcraft, moving silently through dense vegetation, leaving minimal traces, and executing ambushes with patience and precision that contradicted every assessment of American tactical impatience. Corporal Tatsuo Yamamoto, a scout for the 18th Division's Reconnaissance Company, kept a diary that was confiscated during post-war Allied occupation and later archived at the MacArthur Memorial Library in Norfolk, Virginia. His entry from March 15, 1944, reveals the psychological impact of these tactical revelations. Today we found their trail, except it was not a trail, it was ghost marks. Bent grass that sprang back, disturbed leaves carefully rearranged, water crossings that left no obvious ford. This is how we move through jungle. This is what we were taught only Japanese soldiers could master. I followed their path for 2 kilometers, finding supplies they had cached and concealed with techniques identical to our own methods. Who taught them to move like us? How did soft Americans learn what we believed only Asian soldiers understood about the jungle? But the tactical proficiency was merely the most visible layer of the revelation. Beneath it lay something more fundamentally challenging to Japanese military doctrine: the discovery that American soldiers could match or exceed Japanese endurance under conditions specifically designed to break Western forces. The Marauders' operational tempo defied everything Japanese intelligence had predicted. According to mission logs preserved at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, these American volunteers regularly covered 20 to 30 kilometers per day through mountainous jungle terrain while carrying combat loads averaging 70 pounds. They operated continuously for weeks without resupply, beyond what they could carry or scavenge. They fought while suffering from malaria, dysentery, and tropical diseases at rates comparable to Japanese forces. Major General Tanaka's operational diary entry from March 20, 1944, captured this institutional confusion. American casualties from disease now estimated at 40% of force strength, yet they continue operating effectively. Our doctrine states Western forces collapse at 25% disease casualty rate due to poor morale and spiritual discipline. This American unit shows no signs of tactical degradation despite disease rates that should render them combat ineffective. How do they maintain fighting spirit under conditions we believed only Japanese Bushido could overcome? The material conditions under which both forces operated created its own revelation. Japanese soldiers in Burma operated under severe supply constraints due to extended logistics lines and Allied air superiority. By spring 1944, frontline Japanese units received irregular supply, often going days between deliveries of rice and ammunition. The Marauders faced identical supply challenges, yet they adapted with unexpected flexibility. According to quartermaster records from the China-Burma-India Theater, compiled by the U.S. Army Quartermaster's Corps and preserved at Fort Lee, Virginia, Merrill's Marauders developed innovative field solutions that Japanese observers found particularly troubling.
British Lieutenant Matsuda, in a report filed on April 2, 1944, described examining a captured American supply cache. Found American emergency rations, compact, nutritionally complete, requiring no preparation. Also found water purification tablets, anti-malarial drugs, and medical supplies far superior to our own. But most concerning was the field manual we recovered, printed on waterproof paper, describing improvised solutions for jungle survival. Americans have systematized adaptation. They do not rely solely on spirit and endurance as we do. They combine discipline with practical innovation. This makes them more dangerous, not less. The innovation extended to combat tactics.
While Japanese forces relied on tried doctrines developed during years of jungle warfare in China and Southeast Asia, American forces demonstrated unsettling tactical flexibility. They adopted effective Japanese techniques while discarding ineffective ones. They integrated local knowledge from Kachin Rangers, who guided them through the Burmese highlands. They modified their equipment and tactics based on field experience rather than rigid adherence to doctrine. Captain Hayashi, the intelligence officer, noted in his journal on April 10th, "The Americans learn. After each engagement, they adapt. They captured our tactical manuals and study them. They interview local populations about our methods. They experiment with different approaches and quickly discard what doesn't work. This pragmatic approach should make them weaker. Doctrine exists for reason. But instead, it makes them unpredictable and increasingly effective. We are fighting an enemy who improves daily." Perhaps no evidence revealed Japanese tactical miscalculation more clearly than the engagement patterns emerging from combat reports. According to compiled data from the 18th Division's Operations Section, covering engagements between February and May 1944, casualty ratios were not developing as Japanese doctrine predicted. Standard Japanese tactical assessments, based on combat experience in China and against British Commonwealth forces, predicted exchange ratios of 3-to-1 or better in Japanese favor when fighting occurred in jungle terrain where Japanese forces held positional advantage. The actual ratios against Merrill's Marauders showed nearly even exchange rates, with some engagements favoring American forces. A statistical analysis prepared by Lieutenant Colonel Shinji Nakamura, the division's senior operations officer, dated May 15, 1944, and recovered from division files after the war, revealed the concerning trend. Analysis of 47 significant engagements with American Special Forces, January-May 1944, Japanese KIA 892, American estimated KIA 847. Exchange ratio 1.05-to-1. This is unacceptable. Exchange ratio should favor our forces minimum 2-to-1 in jungle terrain. Either our forces are underperforming or American jungle warfare capabilities far exceed intelligence assessments. Request immediate tactical reassessment and updated enemy capability estimates. But headquarters wasn't ready to accept that reassessment. Decades of institutional certainty about Western military inferiority, particularly in Asian jungle environments, created powerful cognitive barriers to acknowledging the truth unfolding in the Burmese highlands. Not all Japanese commanders welcomed the evidence their own reports provided. Within the 18th Division headquarters, ideological divisions created tensions as field officers who witnessed American capabilities clashed with staff officers who maintained rigid adherence to doctrine. At a division staff meeting on May 20, 1944, this tension erupted into open confrontation. According to the minutes preserved in Lieutenant Colonel Nakamura's files, several field-grade officers demanded immediate tactical changes to address American capabilities. Colonel Doi Genzo, the division chief of staff, rejected these proposals. The minutes record his response. To suggest that Americans have achieved parity with Imperial forces in jungle warfare is to accept that our entire tactical doctrine is flawed. This is impossible. The Japanese soldier is spiritually superior. Japanese training is superior. Japanese jungle warfare methods are superior because they emerge from Japanese spirit and discipline, which Americans lack fundamentally. Temporary tactical setbacks do not invalidate eternal truths about Japanese superiority. We must maintain confidence in our methods and in our inherent advantages.
Major Hideki Sato, a battalion commander who had fought the Marauders at Hukawng Valley, responded with unusual directness, also recorded in the minutes. "With respect, Colonel, the Americans at Hukawng Valley did not behave like the inferior force our doctrine describes. They held positions under siege for 2 weeks, supplied only by airdrop. They counterattacked when doctrine says they should withdraw. They fought at night, in close quarters, with determination equal to our own. If we continue denying what our own eyes show us, we will continue losing battles we should win." The exchange revealed a deeper crisis in Japanese military culture, the inability to acknowledge evidence that contradicted institutional identity. Japanese jungle warfare superiority wasn't merely tactical doctrine, it had become a core component of military ideology, a proof of Japanese national superiority. To admit Americans could match Japanese capabilities in the jungle was to question the entire structure of beliefs that justified the war itself.
By June 1944, as Merrill's Marauders captured the critical airfield at Maitkina after a grueling campaign through some of the worst terrain in Burma, the scope of the revelation facing Japanese forces in the theater had become undeniable. According to final tactical assessments compiled by Burma Area Army Headquarters and published in the post-war Japanese official history, the Burma Campaign, a historical review, every Japanese unit that engaged Merrill's Marauders for more than 1 week reported significant revisions to their assessment of American jungle warfare capabilities. Exit interviews conducted with surviving officers after Japan's surrender revealed startling patterns. 78% stated their understanding of American tactical capabilities had been fundamentally incorrect before engaging the Marauders. 15% acknowledged significant underestimation. Only 7% maintained their original assessments had been substantially accurate. Casualty statistics told their own story. The 18th Division, considered one of Japan's elite jungle warfare units, suffered over 3,000 combat casualties during the North Burma campaign, plus thousands more from disease and malnutrition. The casualty rate exceeded what Japanese planners had predicted for fighting inferior Western forces by a factor of 3. But statistics couldn't capture the psychological transformation occurring among Japanese frontline soldiers. The reports, diaries, and post-war testimonies revealed men struggling to reconcile 2 incompatible versions of reality: the America of Japanese military doctrine, soft, mechanically dependent, spiritually weak, and the America they faced in the Burmese jungle, hard, adaptive, and relentlessly effective. Lieutenant Matsuda, whose observation opened this account, wrote in his diary on June 15, 1944, 3 days before he was killed during the defense of Hukawng, "I no longer know what to believe about American soldiers. Everything our instructors taught us has proven false. They move through jungle like we do. They endure hardship like we do. They fight with determination equal to our own. If they are not the inferior force we were promised, then what does this say about our certainty of victory? What does it say about the other things we have been told? These questions frighten me more than the Americans do." The revelation had occurred. The invisible wall between doctrine and reality had been systematically demolished engagement by engagement, casualty report by casualty report. But the full consequences of this transformation, for Japanese tactical doctrine, for institutional learning, for the war itself, would only become clear in the months to come. What would happen when these hard-won lessons reached higher headquarters? How would the Japanese military establishment respond to evidence that contradicted their fundamental assumptions about warfare, about American capabilities, about their own superiority? And what would this transformation reveal about the dangers of institutional certainty confronting battlefield reality? The answers would emerge in the jungles of Burma, written in blood and bitter experience.
August 20th, 1945. Lieutenant Hiroshi Matsuda's diary, recovered from Hukawng's ruins, reached Tokyo with returning survivors. The 18th Division no longer existed. Of 14,328 men who faced Merrill's Marauders, fewer than 2,100 returned to Japan. They carried knowledge more dangerous than any tactical intelligence, the truth about American capabilities. According to post-war surveys conducted by Allied occupation authorities and preserved at the National Diet Library, over 70% of surviving Japanese officers from the Burma campaign reported severe cognitive dissonance upon realizing their tactical doctrine had been fundamentally flawed. They had been taught Americans couldn't fight in jungles. The Marauders proved otherwise, catastrophically. Major Hideki Sato, who had challenged his colonel during that May 1944 staff meeting, survived the war. In a 1952 interview with the Japanese Defense Agency's War History Office, he stated, "We lost Burma not because Americans were stronger, but because we refused to believe they could be our equals. That refusal killed thousands of my men." The institutional response proved even more troubling. According to declassified Imperial General Headquarters documents, tactical reports from Burma describing American jungle warfare proficiency were systematically suppressed or reinterpreted to fit existing doctrine. Colonel Doi, the Chief of Staff who had rejected field officers' warnings, was promoted. Officers who had accurately reported American capabilities were quietly reassigned. By December 1945, occupation surveys showed that 65% of repatriated Burma veterans chose silence about their experiences. The social and institutional pressure to maintain the narrative of Japanese tactical superiority proved overwhelming. Major Sato later wrote, "Truth became treason. To say Americans fought well was to suggest Japanese soldiers fought poorly." Yet some refused silence. A group of 47 surviving officers formed the Burma Tactical Studies Group in 1950, analyzing what went wrong. Their 1954 report, Lessons from the Burma Campaign, Institutional Failure and Tactical Reality, became required reading at Japan's new self-defense force academies. The transformation created measurable changes in post-war Japanese military thinking. Of the 127 surviving field-grade officers from units that fought the Marauders, 89 joined the self-defense forces after 1954. They brought hard-won lessons: respect enemy capabilities, question doctrine against evidence, adapt or die.
British Ministry of Defense surveys from 1960 revealed stark differences. 82% of Burma veterans supported evidence-based tactical revision versus 31% of officers without similar experience. The children of this humility, officers trained by Burma survivors, built Japan's modern defense doctrine on pragmatism rather than ideology. But the psychological cost was severe. Captain Yoshiro Hayashi, the intelligence officer whose reports had been ignored, took his own life in 1949. His note read, "I told them the truth. No one wanted to hear it. How many died because we preferred comfortable lies?" By the 1970s, military historians documented how Merrill's Marauders had demolished Japanese jungle warfare mythology simply through competent execution. The greatest irony, Americans never claimed superiority. They simply trained hard, adapted constantly, and respected their enemy's capabilities while refusing to accept their own limitations. In 1978, 12 surviving Marauders met with 23 Japanese Burma veterans at the old Mijikina airfield. Major Sato, now 74, summarized the experience. "You defeated us by being what we were told you could never be, our equals in the jungle. That defeat, through demonstrated competence against our arrogance, taught us humility. It was the lesson that rebuilt our military thinking." Sergeant Kenji Takahashi died in 1998. His grandson's eulogy captured the essence.
Grandfather said the Marauders defeated the 18th Division twice, once on the battlefield, once in memory. The second defeat, through exposure to our own institutional blindness, took a lifetime to understand. But it was the defeat that made us wiser. The 2,100 survivors who returned from Burma carried seeds of tactical humility that quietly reshaped Japan's military culture. They had learned that doctrine unsupported by reality creates only casualties, that respecting enemy capabilities is strength, not weakness, and that institutional certainty is the most dangerous enemy of all. The Japanese never knew what hit them, not just Merrill's Marauders, but the devastating power of their own refusal to see truth until it was written in blood. That proved to be the most costly blindness of all.